March 1940. Britain faces a slow death, not from aerial bombardment over London, not from armored divisions crossing fields, but from something far more sinister: the quiet vanishing of vessels in the frigid black waters of the Atlantic. Week after week, another merchant fleet departs from North American harbors carrying provisions, petroleum, medical supplies, and essential materials. Week after week, fewer vessels return home. The figures paint a horrifying picture. During just the opening 4 months of 1940, German U-boats dispatched more than 250 Allied vessels to the Atlantic floor. These aren't merely numbers on a maritime chart. This represents thousands of tons of provisions never reaching British households, petroleum never powering British manufacturing plants, and seamen never returning to their families. Britain brings in approximately 55 million tons of goods annually, just to stay alive. The island produces merely 30% of its food supply domestically. Without these merchant fleets, starvation threatens within several months. Admiral Karl Dönitz, leading Germany's U-boat forces, understands his strategy perfectly. He's mastered the wolf-pack approach. Submarine groups hunting as one, synchronizing their strikes, overpowering convoy protection. His U-boats don't engage honorably. They attack after dark, surfacing to strike in blackness where British ASDIC sonar fails to find them. One torpedo can doom a 10,000-ton cargo ship within moments. The sailors, if fortune favors them, might escape before the freezing Atlantic claims their lives. British convoy commanders confront impossible dilemmas on every voyage: increase speed and abandon the slower cargo vessels, maneuver erratically to dodge torpedoes while consuming valuable fuel, stay together for mutual defense while creating a larger target. Each choice could determine survival or death for hundreds of seamen. Winston Churchill, assuming the role of Prime Minister in May 1940, later writes that the U-boat danger was the only thing that truly terrified him throughout the war. Consider that statement carefully. This man confronts Nazi invasion plans, the Blitz, France's collapse, yet what haunts his nights are the silent predators lurking below the surface. By spring 1940, Britain's commercial shipping is vanishing more rapidly than construction yards can rebuild it. The Royal Navy stretches impossibly thin, attempting to protect convoys, pursue submarines, and guard the homeland all at once. Destroyer commanders push their vessels to breaking points, racing between convoy assignments. Never sufficient escorts available. Some merchant fleets cross with merely 1 or 2 warships protecting 30 or 40 commercial vessels. And here's what compounds the crisis. The German submariners grow increasingly aggressive. They operate in coordinated groups now, exchanging intelligence, summoning their pack members upon spotting a convoy. One U-boat trails the merchants through daylight, transmitting location updates. Then when darkness falls, 5 or 6 submarines gather for a systematic slaughter. British seamen begin calling this era the happy time, though that's actually the German terminology. For U-boat crews, it resembles shooting practice. For the Allies, it's pure horror. Yet the wolf packs aren't Britain's gravest challenge, because while Churchill and his naval commanders focus on the U-boat menace, another predator stalks the waters. One that doesn't hunt collectively, requires no crew, and attacks without warning in locations where vessels should be entirely secure. November 21st, 1939. The British destroyer, HMS Gypsy, steams through the Thames estuary just off the English shoreline. This isn't hostile territory. This is virtually Britain's doorstep, a waterway the Royal Navy has cleared for mines repeatedly. Then suddenly, a tremendous explosion rips through the vessel's hull. Gypsy sinks within moments. No torpedo trail, no periscope observation, no warning signs. 3 days afterward, it repeats. The merchant ship SS Terukuni Maru explodes in the identical area. Then another vessel and another. Ships detonate in ports, river entrances, and shoreline waters that should be absolutely protected. The blasts are devastating. Complete bows torn away, vessels split in two, crews killed immediately. By early December 1939, more than a dozen ships have vanished in British territorial waters, and nobody understands the cause. The Admiralty is completely confused. These aren't torpedo strikes. There's no sign of submarine presence in these shallow, heavily monitored zones. These aren't conventional contact mines either. British minesweepers have searched these passages thoroughly and discovered nothing. Ships simply proceed normally, conducting their business, then abruptly cease existing in a surge of water and mangled steel. Fear begins infiltrating British maritime operations. Ship captains who confronted U-boats in the Atlantic without hesitation now dread entering their home ports. Because, at least with U-boats, you understand your enemy. You can maneuver defensively, deploy escorts, release depth charges. But this resembles fighting shadows. Sailors start naming the Thames estuary the Death Channel. Some merchant captains absolutely refuse sailing through particular waterways, even when directly ordered. The casualties continue mounting through December into January 1940. The battleship HMS Nelson, 45,000 tons of British naval might, strikes something near Scotland and barely reaches port with her bow practically demolished. If capital ships face danger, nothing remains safe. Britain's harbors transform into burial grounds, and the Royal Navy can't identify what's destroying the ships. Then comes the breakthrough. November 23, 1939, merely 2 days following HMS Gypsy's loss, a German aircraft is observed releasing something via parachute onto the mudflats near Shoeburyness at low tide. When the tide retreats, British bomb disposal specialists carefully investigate. What they discover transforms everything. It's a mine, yet unlike anything the Royal Navy has encountered previously. No contact horns, no apparent triggering device. It rests there in the mud, appearing almost innocent. Lieutenant Commander John Ouvry and his unit spend hours meticulously studying it. Understanding one mistake could obliterate them and Britain's answer. They work with icy water rising around their feet as tide returns, competing against time. What they uncover inside sends ripples through the Admiralty. This mine doesn't await physical contact with a ship. It requires no direct impact whatsoever. Within the housing lies something far more dangerous, a magnetic detector that senses the metal hull of passing vessels. When a ship sails above, the mine registers the magnetic field from all that steel and iron, then explodes. The Germans have militarized physics itself. Immediately, everything becomes terribly clear. The shallow water strikes, the harbor detonations, the minesweepers passing directly over the devices without activating them. Britain isn't simply battling submarines anymore. It's battling an invisible adversary that converts every vessel's metal hull into a fatal vulnerability. The recovered magnetic mine reaches the desk of someone who has no logical reason being in the Royal Navy whatsoever. Charles Goodeve is a Canadian chemistry instructor who arrived in Britain on an academic program before hostilities. He's not military personnel. He's not a naval designer. He's a researcher who became caught up in Britain's frantic mobilization of every available intellect against the Nazi danger. In late 1939, the Admiralty establishes something called the Department of Miscellaneous Weapons Development. Essentially, a repository for unconventional concepts and the unusual individuals who generate them. Goodeve fits naturally. When the Magnetic Mind Challenge arrives at his office in early 1940, most naval commanders think in conventional frameworks. Construct better minesweepers, create stronger hull armor, chart the minefields more thoroughly. These are reasonable, rational responses from veteran sailors. Goodeve examines the challenge entirely differently. He grasps something the admirals don't. This isn't a maritime problem, it's a physics challenge. The mind disregards armor thickness or vessel design. It's reacting to magnetic fields. Every ship is fundamentally a massive magnet floating through water. Steel hulls become magnetized during manufacturing. The hammering, welding, shaping of metal all arranged the iron molecules within Earth's magnetic field. Even after launching, vessels carry this magnetic fingerprint, and that fingerprint is what's killing sailors. Goodeve's answer sounds completely mad when he initially suggests it. He wants to encircle entire ships in electrical wire and pass current through them. Thousands of feet of cable wound around hulls powered by shipboard generators, producing an electromagnetic field that would neutralize the vessel's natural magnetism. He wants to render ships magnetically invisible. The initial response from the Admiralty is predictable. Senior naval commanders who've dedicated 30 years to sea service are being instructed by a university instructor that they need to transform their warships into floating electromagnets. Some assume he's joking. Others believe he's wasting precious time. One admiral allegedly questions whether Goodeve has been drinking, but Goodeve possesses the mathematics to support it. He demonstrates that every magnetic field has polarity, north and south. The vessel's hull generates one field, and if you create an equal and opposite field surrounding it, the two neutralize each other. It's identical in principle to noise-canceling headphones, except instead of sound waves, you're neutralizing magnetic fields. To the mind's detectors, the ship simply wouldn't register. It would sail directly over the weapon, and the magnetic trigger would never engage. There's just one minor complication. Nobody has attempted this on anything larger than a small boat. Goodeve is proposing to degauss. That's the technical terminology named after the measurement unit of magnetic field strength. Every single vessel in the British fleet, battleships, destroyers, cargo vessels, tankers, trawlers, thousands upon thousands of ships, each requiring individual calculations, exact wire positioning, and meticulous calibration. The logistics are overwhelming, and Britain lacks time. Ships explode daily. The magnetic mines spread to every significant shipping lane around the British Isles. U-boats already sink merchant ships in open waters. Now vessels can't even approach port safely. If the Royal Navy invests months testing and discussing Goodeve's concept, there might not be a fleet remaining to rescue. So despite the doubt, despite the enormous scale of the undertaking, despite the fact that it sounds like science fiction, the Admiralty grants Goodeve authorization to proceed. They lack superior alternatives. Sometimes, during wartime, you must stake everything on the unconventional idea. Here's what makes the magnetic mind so brilliantly devious. Earth itself is a giant magnet with magnetic field lines extending from North Pole to South Pole. When you construct a ship, hammering steel panels, welding connections, bending metal into form, you're performing all this construction within Earth's magnetic field. The iron molecules in the steel progressively align themselves with that field like miniature compass needles, all orienting the same direction. The vessel becomes permanently magnetized, bearing what researchers call a magnetic signature. This signature is most powerful at the vessel's extremities, the bow and stern, where the hull curves most sharply. A standard 10,000-ton cargo vessel generates a magnetic field detectable from 30 feet distance. Battleships, with their enormous steel armor, create even stronger fields. The field doesn't deactivate when the crew departs. It doesn't vanish in fog or night. It's perpetually there, radiating from the hull like a signal that announces "detonate here" to any magnetic mine within detection range. German engineers grasped this completely when they created their weapon. The mine rests on the sea floor, patient and quiet. Inside its waterproof container, a magnetometer, essentially a sensitive compass, monitors the surrounding magnetic field. When a vessel passes overhead, the magnetometer registers the sudden alteration in field intensity. Once that change exceeds a predetermined threshold, an electrical circuit completes. Current flows to the explosive charge, and 650 pounds of high explosive transform the seabed into a lethal zone. The elegance of the design from Germany's viewpoint is that it's virtually impossible to sweep. Traditional mines float on the surface or just beneath, attached to anchors via cables. Minesweepers can sever those cables or destroy the mines with gunfire. But magnetic mines sit directly on the bottom in shallow waters. Minesweepers passing overhead simply trigger them like any other vessel. Britain lost multiple minesweepers this way before they understood what was occurring. Goodeve's degaussing answer attacks the challenge at its origin. If you can't conceal the ship's metal, you neutralize its magnetic field. The method requires encircling the ship in a long cable loop, sometimes a single loop around the complete hull, sometimes multiple loops at varying heights. When electrical current flows through this cable, it produces its own magnetic field, according to principles discovered by physicist Hans Christian Ørsted back in 1820. The challenge is achieving the correct polarity. If the vessel's hull has a magnetic north pole at the bow, you conduct current through the degaussing cable in a direction that produces a south pole at the identical location. The two fields interact and cancel each other. Execute this properly around the complete hull, and the vessel's magnetic signature reduces from 30 feet to merely a few inches. Too faint to activate the mine's detectors. But here's where complexity arises. Every ship differs. A destroyer constructed in Glasgow has a different magnetic signature than a freighter built in Newcastle. The intensity varies based on steel composition, construction techniques, how recently the ship was built, even which direction it faced in the shipyard. You can't simply wrap standard cable around every vessel and consider it finished. Each ship requires individual measurement, customized calculations, and exact calibration. Goodeve recognizes he's not merely solving a physics challenge. He's attempting to revolutionize ship construction procedures for the complete British merchant and naval fleet. And he must accomplish it in weeks, not years. The initial test occurs in January 1940 at HMS Vernon, the Royal Navy's torpedo and mining academy in Portsmouth. Goodeve and his team choose a small minesweeper, HMS Board, as their test subject. They invest 3 days measuring the vessel's magnetic field from every angle using sensitive magnetometers borrowed from university physics departments. Then they wrap 2,000 feet of heavy electrical cable around the hull in a meticulously calculated arrangement, connect it to a generator, and activate the switch. The outcomes are remarkable. The vessel's magnetic signature decreases by over 90%. When they sail HMS Board over test magnetic detectors, the instruments barely register anything. It's as though the ship has disappeared from the magnetic spectrum. Goodeve's unconventional concept actually functions. But success generates its own crisis. One experimental ship is a proof of concept. Britain operates over 9,000 merchant vessels, plus hundreds of Royal Navy warships, destroyers, cruisers, battleships, and countless support craft. Every single one requires degaussing if they're going to survive transit through British waters, and ships continue arriving daily. American freighters, Canadian escorts, commandeered trawlers, emergency-built cargo ships. The queue never stops expanding. Goodeve performs the calculations, and it's frightening. Each vessel requires approximately 2,000 feet of thick copper cable. That's over 18 million feet of cable for the merchant fleet alone. Sufficient to encircle Earth's equator. Britain's copper reserves are already strained, supporting electrical infrastructure, ammunition manufacturing, and aircraft production. Now, Goodeve needs a complete additional supply network just for degaussing cable. Then there's the installation challenge. You can't simply employ any electrician from the street for this work. The cable positioning must be exact. Incorrect placement and the degaussing field won't properly neutralize the hull's magnetism. Excessive current, and you risk igniting fires or harming electrical systems. Insufficient current, and the vessel remains at risk. Each installation demands trained personnel who comprehend both electrical engineering and naval design. Britain doesn't possess these people. The nation is fighting a war on multiple fronts. Every qualified engineer already works 16-hour shifts on radar, aircraft engines, weapon systems, or code breaking. Goodeve must establish a complete degaussing workforce, train them in weeks, and deploy them to shipyards throughout Britain and eventually Allied harbors worldwide. The Admiralty establishes degaussing facilities at major ports: Portsmouth, Liverpool, Glasgow, Belfast, Cardiff. Each facility receives magnetometer equipment, cable supplies, and hastily trained technical teams. Ships arriving in port are immediately measured. Calculations are performed, cable is wound around hulls, and generators are installed. The complete process consumes about 48 hours per ship, if everything proceeds flawlessly. It never proceeds flawlessly. Ships arrive damaged from attacks, requiring repairs before degaussing can even begin. Cable shipments get delayed, generators malfunction, workers make measurement mistakes and must restart. And throughout all of this, U-boats still prowl outside the harbors, waiting for degaussed ships to emerge and join convoys heading into the Atlantic. Goodeve realizes he needs a quicker solution for the enormous backlog of vessels. His team creates a simplified system called wiping. Ships steam slowly past a shoreline installation where massive electromagnets temporarily neutralize their magnetic fields. It's not permanent like proper degaussing, but it endures several weeks. Wiping facilities appear at harbor entrances, processing multiple ships daily instead of one every 2 days. By March 1940, Britain is degaussing ships more rapidly than Germany can deploy magnetic mines. But it's a frantic race against time. Speed becomes paramount. Goodeve's operation transforms from a small experimental program into the largest emergency engineering project in British history. By April 1940, degaussing facilities operate continuously. 3 shifts, 24 hours daily, 7 days weekly. Sparks fly from welding equipment at midnight. Exhausted electricians measure magnetic fields at sunrise. Cable teams work through air raids, disregarding sirens. Because every hour a ship waits for degaussing is an hour it can't transport desperately needed supplies. The Admiralty recruits workers from wherever they can locate them. Retired electricians are summoned back into service. University physics students are conscripted straight from classrooms. Women join degaussing teams in unprecedented quantities, operating magnetometers and calculating cable arrangements. Work that demands precision and mathematical ability, not physical power. By summer 1940, over 3,000 people work in degaussing operations throughout Britain. The logistics are staggering. Cable arrives by the ton at ports, wound on enormous reels. Workers develop specialized methods for managing the heavy copper wire. It's thick as a thumb and weighs several pounds per foot. Getting it around a vessel's hull means lowering teams on scaffolding along the ship's sides, securing the cable with brackets every few feet, ensuring connections are waterproof and won't deteriorate in salt water. On a large freighter, the installation consumes a full day of exhausting physical labor. Then there's the verification. After installation, every ship must be measured again to confirm the degaussing effectiveness. Ships steam slowly through designated testing zones while shore-based magnetometers record their signatures. If the readings remain too elevated, teams return and adjust the current, reposition cables, troubleshoot the system. Some vessels require 3 or 4 attempts before they're properly neutralized. The program expands beyond British territory. Canada establishes degaussing facilities in Halifax and Montreal. American ports, technically neutral until December 1941, quietly established degaussing capabilities for ships that will join British convoys. Gibraltar, Alexandria, Cape Town, Bombay, anywhere Allied shipping concentrates. Degaussing equipment follows. Goodeve's team produces training manuals, ships equipment overseas, and instructs foreign crews in the methods. But ships continue dying. June 1940 brings disaster on multiple fronts. France surrenders to Germany, providing U-boats access to Atlantic ports like Brest and Lorient, reducing 450 miles from their hunting distance. Suddenly, German submarines can remain on patrol significantly longer, striking convoys farther from British shores. And while thousands of ships now have degaussing protection against magnetic mines, they remain vulnerable to torpedoes in open water. The Admiralty confronts brutal prioritization decisions. Prioritize warships for degaussing or merchant vessels? New ships just launched or older vessels with years of service? Fast ships that can potentially outpace U-boats or slow cargo haulers transporting the most tonnage? Every decision means some ships will wait longer, remain vulnerable longer, face greater risk. Goodeve's teams work through the Blitz. London's docks burn from German bombing attacks, but degaussing continues. Liverpool suffers devastating strikes in May 1941. Over 2,000 civilians killed, port infrastructure battered, yet the degaussing facility keeps functioning. Glasgow, Belfast, Cardiff, all endure air raids, while cable crews continue wrapping ships. By year's end 1940, Britain has degaussed over 4,000 vessels. By mid-1941, that figure exceeds 10,000. It's an engineering accomplishment that rivals constructing the ships themselves. Except it's being executed under wartime conditions with limited resources, constant enemy action, and the awareness that every delay costs lives at sea. The statistics tell the narrative better than words ever could. In the first 3 months of 1940, before degaussing became widespread, magnetic mines sink or damage 115 British ships in home waters. By late 1940, after thousands of vessels received degaussing protection, that figure drops to fewer than 20 ships for the same 3-month period. By 1941, magnetic mine losses become almost insignificant, less than a dozen vessels for the complete year. Goodeve's unconventional concept has essentially neutralized Germany's wonder weapon. But saving ships from magnetic mines is only half the struggle. The Atlantic itself remains a killing ground. U-boats don't care whether a ship is degaussed or not. Torpedoes destroy hulls regardless of magnetic signatures. And 1941 becomes the most savage year of the entire convoy war. Dönitz has over 100 operational U-boats by year's end, and his wolf packs are devastating convoys with terrifying effectiveness. In November 1941 alone, U-boats sink 62 Allied ships totaling over 300,000 tons. Yet, degaussing provides convoys something they desperately need: predictability. Previously, merchant captains faced dangers from multiple directions simultaneously: U-boats in deep water, magnetic mines in shallow water, airstrikes near coastlines. Ships had to navigate gauntlets from the moment they departed North American ports until they docked in Britain, with no secure zones anywhere along the route. Degaussing eliminates one variable. Convoys can now concentrate entirely on the U-boat threat. Escort commanders don't need to worry about ships exploding in harbor approaches. Vessels can take defensive routes through shallow coastal waters where submarines can't pursue because magnetic mines no longer represent a threat there. The British can focus defensive resources, destroyers, aircraft, radar installations, on anti-submarine warfare instead of dispersing them across multiple threats. The psychological effect is tremendous. Merchant crews who've witnessed ships detonate in supposedly safe harbors now have confidence their degaussed vessels can actually reach port. Morale improves. Sailors stop declining assignments. The steady drumbeat of mysterious explosions that terrorized British shipping in late 1939 and early 1940 simply ceases. Ships still sink, plenty of them, but at least crews understand what they're fighting. By 1942, the degaussing program becomes so routine it's barely worth noting in naval reports. Every ship receives degaussing as automatically as it receives paint. New vessels are constructed with degaussing coils already incorporated in the hull. Liberty ships rolling off American production lines at the rate of 3 daily all include degaussing systems as standard equipment. What seemed impossible in January 1940, protecting the entire Allied fleet, becomes standard operating procedure by 1942. The Germans attempt to adapt. They modify magnetic mines with more sensitive triggers, attempting to detect even degaussed ships. They add acoustic detectors that respond to propeller sound. They combine magnetic and pressure detonators that require both a magnetic signature and a pressure wave from the vessel's bow. But every adaptation requires new mine production, new deployment, and Britain's minesweepers, now that they comprehend the threat, become far more effective at clearing the weapons. The Battle of the Atlantic continues until May 1945, and U-boats remain lethal until Germany's surrender. But the magnetic mine threat that nearly paralyzed British shipping in 1940 never recovers. Goodeve's solution endures. Ships continue crossing the Atlantic, keeping Britain fed, supplied, and in the war. Not because they're invulnerable, but because one fewer weapon can destroy them. Charles Goodeve never becomes a household name. No monuments are erected to honor him. No Hollywood films dramatize his achievement. While codebreakers at Bletchley Park and radar scientists at Bawdsey Manor receive post-war recognition, the man who saved thousands of ships and tens of thousands of lives remains largely unknown outside naval engineering circles. That's often how warfare works. The most vital innovations occur quietly, solved by people nobody's heard of, while headlines concentrate on battles and generals. But the impact of his work extends far beyond World War II. Degaussing becomes permanent naval doctrine for every major navy globally. Modern warships still employ degaussing systems, though they've evolved into sophisticated computer-controlled installations that continuously adjust to changing magnetic conditions. Submarines, which must avoid detection by magnetic anomaly detectors, use even more advanced degaussing technology. The same principles protect undersea cables, scientific instruments, and sensitive electronics from magnetic interference. Goodeve's broader legacy lies in how he approached the challenge. He didn't think like a naval officer bound by tradition and conventional tactics. He thought like a scientist who understood that modern warfare increasingly meant fighting physics itself. Radar was transforming air combat into an electromagnetic chess match. Sonar was making submarine warfare a battle of sound waves, and magnetic mines had weaponized Earth's own magnetic field. Victory would go to whoever best understood and exploited scientific principles. The Royal Navy recognized this transformation. The Department of Miscellaneous Weapons Development, where Goodeve worked, evolved into a permanent institution. Britain established closer connections between universities and military research. Scientists stopped being treated as eccentric outsiders and became integral to defense planning. Goodeve himself advanced to become Director of Naval Land Equipment, then Controller of Research and Development for the Ministry of Supply. After the war, he received a knighthood and continued working on scientific challenges until his death in 1980. But perhaps the most significant lesson from the degaussing story is about institutional adaptability under pressure. The Royal Navy in 1940 was one of history's most tradition-bound organizations. Hundreds of years of customs, protocols, and established procedures. Yet when confronted with an existential threat, when ships were exploding and conventional solutions weren't working, the Admiralty gave a university professor with a radical idea the authority to rewire their entire fleet. That kind of institutional courage is uncommon. Consider what Britain accomplished in less than 2 years. They took a theoretical concept, proved it worked, scaled it to thousands of ships, trained thousands of workers, established global infrastructure, and essentially solved a problem that threatened to starve the nation into surrender, all while fighting a war on multiple fronts, enduring bombing raids, facing possible invasion, and operating under conditions of absolute desperation. The convoys kept sailing. Britain survived, and though degaussing was just one factor among many, convoy tactics, escort carriers, long-range patrol aircraft, code breaking, and sheer courage all played crucial roles. It eliminated one deadly threat at precisely the moment when Britain couldn't afford any more losses. Sometimes during war, the most unconventional idea proves to be the correct one. Sometimes wrapping ships in miles of electrical cable and transforming them into electromagnets is exactly what saves a nation. And sometimes the hero isn't the admiral on the bridge or the pilot in the cockpit. It's a Canadian chemistry professor who understood magnetism better than anyone imagined possible.